Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today, we're going to get into all things Scorpio. So, as I'm recording this, it is the new moon in Libra. And tomorrow on Wednesday, the sun moves into Scorpio. The moon is moving into Scorpio today as well, but the sun moves into Scorpio tomorrow. Scorpio season is all about depth. But what I find really beautiful is that every sign in the zodiac goes through with the wheel just a new path of life, and they build on top of each other. And so, one thing that I've learned that's so supportive on my journey is really learning how to work with the astrology in day to day life. And I typically work a lot in reflection, but also, in bigger chunks of time where the sun is transiting Scorpio or Libra or whatever, like there is focused attention specifically with the sun because the sun is the brightest thing in the sky, right? And so it's really hyper fixating attention on a certain sign. And of course, longer transiting planets like Uranus, uh, Neptune, Pluto, those things that stay in signs for a significant amount of time. Of course, they have impact, but they're there for so long that I think sometimes we forget. And then I'll like feel really intensely. And I'm like, what's going on? Like when Saturn was transiting Pisces, there was a chunk of time where I felt like I was spiraling. I was like, what is happening? And it was sitting right on top of my natal Jupiter. So there's just like little things like that with in reflection. But I do think that in preparation, we can use the astrology specifically as the sun navigates through the chart and the moon. The moon is faster, so it only stays in a sign every couple for like 2 or 3 days. But astrology is the study of patterns, right? Which is why I love it. You can look back, if you study like historical events in astrology, there are just certain things that tend to happen when certain planets are in certain signs or certain planets are aspecting certain things. And it's really, really beautiful to pay attention to and to have awareness of, which is obviously why I talk so much about the transits. And this is a huge, huge, like probably 50% or more maybe of astro design school, where we're going in, you're learning your chart, you're learning how to read your chart, learning to understand your chart, you're learning how to read your own story through the lens of your chart. And then we're layering it with learning the transits. We're following the astrology transits. We're understanding how human design layers on that. We're going through the moon cycles. We're learning all of these things. We're learning the polarities because it is a 6-month program. So within that 6 months, we're learning the polarities of like Aries, Libra, Taurus, Scorpio, Gemini, Sagittarius, Cancer, Capricorn, Leo, Aquarius, Virgo, Pisces, right? We're going through all of that in depth because I am nothing if not deep. So we're going deep, right? And the thing about astrology that I absolutely love, so I've been really diving into soul-centered esoteric astrology. And I literally feel like my soul is singing, having encountered this type of astrology. I love psychological astrology, which is what I was kind of introduced to and which I found fascinating because to me, I want to understand how you perceive yourself, not so much how the world sees you or events that layer on, because I think that events can happen, things can happen, but when you understand how you perceive the world, the duality of that or the potential of that, we'll say, that to me changes everything, right? And so my introduction to astrology was through human design. I learned about human design first. And I was like, whoa, that's really cool. And I will always, always love human design. It is part of my core. It radically changed my life. It saved my life in some ways. And then somebody was like, let's pull your human design chart, or sorry, let's pull your astrology chart. And when I saw my chart, I was like, whoa, there is more than my sun. I am more than a Taurus. Oh my gosh. And the spiral has not stopped since. But what I love about astrology is that, again, human design was so beautiful in so many ways. And I love human design and will always love human design. But when I learned astrology, when I started to dive into astrology, it felt like a part of my soul was recognizing the language held in astrology. It's like my soul could see, yeah, astrology as a language, as a story, as information that was passed down through the ages, like ancient mystics, like ancient civilizations. Like we've used astrology for so long that it is like this secret almost language that's held in there. And it was like my entire body like lit up when I learned astrology. And now that I've kind of found my way into the soul-centered esoteric astrology, I'm even more recognizing my pull towards it, my call towards it, the truth of it, the resonance. And so I'm going to be layering in a little bit of esoteric astrology with the bigger astrology that I talk about now, because it's just so beautiful. Like, it's literally the soul is speaking. And I was listening to the Gene Keys, actually Gene Key 50, because I was preparing for the new moon, which the new moon is in gate 50, which is the gate of values. But part of what this gate is that Richard Rudd was talking about, with the I Ching and like, again, all these ancient cultures and civilizations, they used numbers as a language, right? Whereas we're like, oh no, I think it actually was gate 62 that this was referring to, because gate 62 is the gate of intellect, gate of detail. But what we do is now we've taken numbers, right? When you think about human design or astrology, we're living this Uranian life cycle, which is 84 years. My math is not great, so I might do my numbers wrong. There are 12 signs in astrology, right? 7-year cycles. I mean, when you look at these repeated numbers like 7, 12, 84, they break down. And it's really like the numerology behind it is so potent and powerful. And it's been used for so long as a language, as like information was being held inside this like coding. I don't know how else to say it. And we have all of this within us, right? Like, that's the astrology: as above, so below, as within, as without, like the microcosm, the macrocosm, all these things. Like, I saw a reel or video, and it was like, I don't know, it said something about you're worried about XYZ, and you know, the universe that we know could be potentially held within a cell of like another being, and it like zoomed out so dramatically to like all of our solar system and the universes that we know of and those that we don't, and then it zooms out into this little cell, right, that's in somebody else. And I've always thought that, I'm like, I bet like our entire what we know is just like a tiny little particle inside of somebody else's cell, and it just like keeps going on like that. So it's like the vastness of it. It's like, we, in a single cell in our body, we literally hold like universes, we hold lives, we hold the stars. Like, I don't know, it's so beautiful and I love it. And so I was going on all of this to say that like I felt like when I learn astrology, when I speak astrology, when I understand or just any of it, it just feels like every cell in my being is like singing in remembrance of this information, of this language that we used to speak, right? And we've forgotten, and I think we're coming back to it. And so anyway, that's a long-winded way. And the depth of that, right, is held in Scorpio. But so we're going to talk about Scorpio today. So as this comes out, the sun will have been in Scorpio. So first and foremost, identify where in your chart Scorpio is. If you don't have your chart, you can go to astro.com, plug in your birth information. It will give you your chart. I think CoStar, if you're beginning, CoStar might be easier because it kind of lists out in a easier way. Like, it'll say what house, what sign, what planet, that kind of stuff. But you want to know what the Scorpio is, like the M with the little like scorpion tail. So you want to find where in your chart Scorpio is. What house does it rule? Be 12 houses, whichever one that it rules, that is the area of life that this will be impacting. So in my chart, I am a Leo rising. Therefore, Scorpio for me is in my 4th house. My IC is there. Pluto is there at 5 degrees. It is conjunct my south node, out of sign conjunction to my south node, because my south node is 29 degrees of Libra, which is also why today this new moon feels so intense for me, and not in like an emotional way, but just a lot is coming up. Actually, one short story before we dive into Scorpio, because again, like I said, so much of astrology is about patterns. So much of healing is about patterns, right? It's about creating awareness of our patterns so that we can choose something different, right? So we can do something different. I was talking last week on the podcast. Was it on the podcast, or maybe it was the secret podcast? I don't remember. But I was talking about, that age-old question of, is it nurture or nature? Or do we have free will, rather? That was it. Do we have free will? And it's like, the more you're woke, the more you wake up, the more you create awareness, the more free will and choice that you have. Because if we're just running on autopilot, if we're running on our conditioning and just, going through the motions or operating out of our patterning, we don't have any choice because we're just our subconscious is running the show. And yes, our subconscious runs 95%, but once you create awareness, yes, you may run on autopilot sometimes, but the awareness is there, and that begins it, right? And then you have the choice, then you can pause, you can find a moment of stillness, you can come in, you can see your pattern, you can even just acknowledging, I acknowledge this is a pattern. I'm going to choose different. Or even just letting go of the guilt or shame is huge. So, short story. And I always try and share these experiences, not to dramatize anything, but to provide examples, I guess, of creating awareness around a pattern, or sort of like my real time, what kind of happens in my mind, because my mind is always going. But I had an interaction with somebody the other day that was very interesting and unique and slightly odd. And I love people. I love hearing their stories. I was talking to some woman the other day, and I don't know actually what her job is, but she like distributes wine. And she was telling me she was going to a whole bunch of wine tastings. So she was just like sipping on some soda water to like cleanse her palate or something like that. And so I was like, how'd you get into that? Because I don't even drink anymore, but I love wine. That's like the one thing that is really hard for me to like let go of. Like I love a good glass of wine with dinner. But so anyway, we've gotten a whole conversation about that. That's a whole side tangent. But the point of that being is like, I love to understand how people got where they are at, how a passion was ignited, how they followed a thread, how they just, everybody's got these really beautiful stories. And I love to hear it. So I'm always asking people like, how did you do that? Or like when somebody says they're an entrepreneur, it's like, how did you get into that? How did you find the passion? How did you grow? How did you market? Like, I just like love all those types of conversations. So this person comes up and just starts kind of talking about, I don't even remember what the conversation started, but I could tell they were like charismatic, just very outspoken, whatever, all the things. I am a compassionate person. I care. I listen. I hold a little bit of shadow in there because that people pleasy part of me is like, I'm going to give you the floor, or I don't quite know when to cut someone off, or I don't want to be rude. I don't want to rock the boat, right? Like those kinds of things. And so I simultaneously have this, I love that compassionate, caring part of me. I love, like I said, I love to hear people's stories. Like I love it. But also, then the struggle comes when I feel that disconnect and I feel a boundary, an energetic boundary being crossed, or I feel like I want to pull myself back, or I feel myself getting drained a little bit. Then it becomes hard to like set boundaries. So this person was talking, again, I don't remember how it started, but it quickly moved into Jesus, the Bible, God. Like literally one point was telling me why men are better than women. And it was at that point where I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is like going somewhere I'm not comfortable with. But I noticed that I value that part of myself that listens, because I do feel like sometimes people who just talk and talk and talk aren't always heard, because I think when you talk so much, you come off so strongly, it can be off-putting to some people. And so I never try and judge people. I always try and come from a place of curiosity, all the things. But then I can feel when it was starting to get a little shifty, right? Where I was like, ooh, I don't know if I agree with where this conversation is going. But the good girl in me, if you can see on YouTube, I'm air quoting, big air quotes. The good girl in me was like, okay, just smile, just ask the right questions, be polite, be kind. And then I started to get mad at myself a little bit because I was like, just like wanting to get all the conversation and where it was starting to go. But then I noticed a point in this. This is a pattern. And I don't know if it's because I am attentive and I listen and I ask questions, then people, specifically men, when this happens, think that I'm interested, and I am not. And so, of course, I could tell when it started to shift, energy to, I could just tell the things that were being said, the ego that was being brought in. And I could tell at the end where it was going. And right before they left, I knew it was going to happen. And they asked for my number. And I was like, oh, no. And then that's the hard part. That is a lesson for me, is saying no. And not just avoiding, because that's the easier thing to do, is like, oh, I have to go or disappear and not actually give the answer. And so anyway, I did not give this person my phone number, but I was thinking about the interaction afterwards, how it went so far to where it was. Because yes, I was listening and I asked questions here and there, but this person, I'm convinced that their Neptune was conjunct or square or opposite their Mercury, because I don't know if they quite knew what they were saying. Like the story was jumping, like the reflector had that. The reflector had Mercury opposite Neptune, and I swear I had to like decipher. I had to. It was like you had to follow the threads of like the side stories to like come around to the actual story. I don't even think he knew what he was talking about half the time, and it was like kind of like that vibe, that energy. He would get really loud and then he would whisper, and I can't hear that well to begin with, so then I just kind of smile. And at the end of the whole thing he was like, oh, you are such an intelligent woman. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, I mean, I am. Thank you. But also, like, I didn't even engage in this conversation. It was just very, very strange. And I was thinking, Mars and Mercury are conjunct in Scorpio. So maybe like as this is where I love astrology, right? Because then if you layer it on and the transits, and not to say everything has to do, because yes, like free will and all that kind of stuff, but when you look at layer on the astrology and specifically the new moon, specifically to me with my south node, it's those south node, like those patterns, the things that I witnessed in myself coming up, like that people pleasy, like just smile, just play the part, don't rock the boat, don't tell this person your personal perspective. But and also noticing where I made changes or where I did things or chose differently than I would have in the past. And those are the little things that I can celebrate. And I don't think it always looks like a massive radical shift and change in behavior. It can. I just knocked something off. I was like, what is that? It can, but I do think more often than not, it's the small little changes. And then one day we behave in a radically different way than we would have years ago. And we're like, whoa, look at that change. And so, although there was a moment during that interaction where I could feel myself getting angry at myself because of that like whole good girl thing, where it's like, oh, I'm just going to smile and be polite and like whatever and not rock the boat because that's what's expected of girls. And especially when he was talking about like, religion and men being better and girls need to be submissive. And I was like, oh, this is getting really uncomfortable. But the ability to let go of like the need to shame myself or to feel guilty about it. And it's like in that situation, that's the best way I could. I don't know this person. Like, and it was just in that situation, I feel like it did show up in the best way. But it was just interesting with everything. I tell all of that story to wrap it up to that my South Node is in Libra and it was conjunct this new moon. And so the theme of this new moon was transforming patterns, understanding our values, letting go of values that are not ours, right? Being nurtured and expanded in doing this work. Because a huge part of this is like a lot of the shit that we take on as our own was passed down generationally, right? We don't always see it. Like I gave an example. I think it was during the new moon circle, I think. But I was like giving an example of, when you get in like back in the day, when we used to get those email threads where it was like, send this to 15 people or you'll die or something, right? And so you're like, oh no, I have to send this to 15 people. And then you send it off to 15 people. And those people send it off to 15 people. And those people send it off to 15 people. But somewhere along the way, like the original email had a virus in it, right? And then you're corrupting all these other, because the shadow of gate 50 is corruption, but you're corrupting all these other computers. But you're like, where did this even come from? I don't know where the original source of this was, right? And sometimes the values, the things that we take on as our own have just been passed down through so many lines of generations that we don't know where they came from. We don't know why we value them. So this moon being opposite to Chiron, which when this episode comes out on Thursday, will still be within that energy. But the sun and moon, the new moon being opposite to Chiron, to me is what it feels like. Yes, like Chiron is our core wound, right? If you think about like the mythology of Chiron, he's like, he couldn't heal his wound and he traded places with, I can't remember what the guy's name was, right? So like to give up his immortality. I don't know. I'm completely butchering the story, but the whole point of Chiron, right? He was trained in like philosophy and healing arts and like all these different things. And so Chiron in your chart is like, you can't necessarily heal Chiron. Like you have to, Chiron is sort of the place where you just have to accept the wounding, right? Like accept that, right? He got shot by Hercules' arrow and just, it was never like, it wouldn't heal, right? And so then it's like you have to sort of accept that there is this like wound in you that you cannot heal yourself, but in healing others and supporting others, then you're in turn able to sort of heal yourself within that. And um so it really feels like with this being about values, right? So much about values. Can we identify the wounding that we have that's been passed down from generation to generation that we're not maybe aware of, and begin to do that work to create awareness of patterns that aren't even ours so that we can stop passing them on to further generations, right? So this is big work. This is not just like, oh, this is a pretty Libra new moon and what do I find beautiful and peaceful and easeful? Like, yeah, those are parts of it because it's ruled by Venus. And also it's really deep. It's really big. It's a lot more than that. So, okay, whew, we got through that. Now let's talk about Scorpio. So the 22nd, the sun moves into Scorpio. So again, identifying where in your chart Scorpio is so that you can understand what area of life will be impacted. Again, I'm going to use myself as an example because it's easy, and I'll throw in a few other examples in there. But for me, Scorpio is in my fourth house. This is the house of my home, my family, my ancestors, my inner world. The fourth house is naturally ruled by Cancer and the moon. So there is a lot of emotions here. There's a lot of, tradition here. Depending who you speak to, the fourth house can be related to the mother. It can be related to the father, kind of your primary caregiver, right? And so whatever that feels like for you, whatever feels resonant, whether it's mother or father, right? That holds that energy in there. But this is my personal chart. Scorpio naturally rules the eighth house. The eighth house of the occult, drug, sex, rock and roll, other people's money, finances. So it is a money house. It has to do with that. And it is ruled by Mars and Pluto. Esoterically, it is ruled by Mars. And this is really about, like, I've said this before, I really, really feel like Pluto holds the duality within it. Scorpio has three different archetypes, right? It is the scorpion that we all here have heard of, right? The scorpion, it runs around on the ground and it gets you with its tail and it gets you or whatever, and it's sneaky and all that stuff. It's the eagle archetype. So the eagle flies above, right? It's a little bit more detached from the emotional experience, like it's gone through it. It comes up, but sometimes it comes down. It's got a little ego to it, right? It's got to come down, and whether it's plucking mice off the ground or whatever. And then the third archetype, technically there's four because I did a whole reel on Instagram. People are like, oh, why didn't you talk about the phoenix? And yes, I do feel like the phoenix rising from the ashes is definitely an archetype of this. But the third one is the dove. It's, the dove is the symbol of peace. And it's this energy of, when you look at Scorpio, again, it holds that duality. It's lightness and it's darkness, mostly darkness. So we have to go through the darkness to come up to the light, right? Scorpio tends to hold a lot of low frequency energy. So if you have a Scorpio sun or a Scorpio rising, your soul is sort of committed to challenge in this life. You have to transcend the jealousy, the possession, the anger, the greed, the fear, like these kind of feelings. We have to transcend and go through that to come up to that like that alchemist type of energy, the healing type of energy, that transformative energy that Scorpio does hold. Scorpio feels deeply. Scorpio is a fixed water sign. It will dig its feet in, right? Like Scorpio is determined. It is focused. It will do the thing. Like Mars ruling Aries will just like start things and it'll plow forward, but that doesn't always have like the staying power, right? It's a cardinal sign. So yes, it's really great initiatory energy, not so great in follow through. So Scorpio is fixed. It's determined. It will go. And when you think about that, like if you have any sort of like water, like a river or something, if there's a rock in the way, or you put like a boat in there, or you try and cut off the water will find a way, right? It will go around it. It'll find a way to get around that thing that you've put in its way, right? And Scorpio is it's kind of like one of those signs like Capricorn, where it's just like, if you're born with this very prominent in your chart, you kind of came here for the challenge, right? Like Capricorn, I feel like the three signs to me that like just came here for a little bit of challenge primarily are Capricorn and Scorpio. Also, I think Virgo a little bit too. That whole like perfectionist energy, like I think Virgo came here just to find a little challenge too in a different way. So, okay. So yeah, if you came here, if you have really prominent Scorpio, you probably came here to experience a little bit of challenge, but the goal is to transcend that. We have to go through that like sort of darkness to come out and come above, right, into the light. We have to like move through that. My sun is a Scorpio rising with Mars on his ascendant. And so it's like, it's so hard to witness because there has to come a point with Scorpio where they accept their responsibility in things, right? And obviously that comes from maturity and age. And we all, again, we all carry Scorpio in us somewhere, depends on what part of life it is. So for me, that's my home life and my family life. There comes a time where I have to realize like I am standing in my own way. If I want to heal this area of my life, if I want to do better in this area of my life, if I want to witness this area, if I want to feel good in this area of my life, like I have to take radical responsibility for it, right? In order to change it. And so this is a big part of Scorpio. And again, with my son, he projects like everything is everybody else's fault, right? He's 9, so he's still learning, but everything is everybody else's fault. And so there is a time in his life where he's going to have to take responsibility. And I try and tell him that now, like, hey, bud, like, let's just take responsibility for our own parts in it. And like, let's have the conversation and move on. Like, it doesn't have to be this whole big, oh my gosh, you think I'm the worst person in the world because I asked you to pick up your shoes. Like, that's not the way that this has to work. But he's 9 and he's learning. And it's just, it's almost humorous to watch if it wasn't so frustrating at times. But I also think that it's interesting that my Pluto is in Scorpio and in my 4th house of family and home, and my son has a Scorpio rising and Mars on the ascendant. So he's constantly poking and prodding and like picking at that scab that forces me to see myself, because I could sit around and get frustrated and be like, you guys are ridiculous, or you guys are frustrating me. Or I can understand that it's just picking the scab that needs to get air and it needs to heal. So that's sort of that. So okay. Scorpio has, okay, so I'm if you're watching on YouTube, I'm reading something that I wrote, a note that I took. So there's 3 important archetypes in the collective, right? Christ, which is Pisces, which is related to Pisces, Buddha, which is related to Taurus, and then like Hercules, the hero disciple, because Scorpio holds the energy of the disciple. The path of discipleship is what Scorpio holds. And then so Hercules, the hero disciple, again, that is Scorpio. So again, Scorpio in this lifetime, the season of Scorpio, we're being tested mind, body, and emotions, right? Again, it's all to transcend into the higher frequencies, the higher realms, but we have to go through the bottom realms to get there. So again, you have to realize that you're standing in your own way. I did make some notes here, so I wanted to make sure that I was covering everything that I wanted to talk about before we like moved on. Okay, this was the other thing that I want to talk about. Okay, so what I found interesting. So we know that Scorpio, 8th house, Pluto, drugs, or sorry, death, birth, and oh my gosh, what were transfer, death, rebirth, and transformation. Those are the 3: death, rebirth, and transformation. So, and Scorpio rules, it also has sex, intimacy, because we're moving from Libra, which is balance and harmony. Libra is all relationship focused, pleasure, art, beauty, aesthetics, things like that, into Scorpio. So Scorpio, 8th house, also has to do with intimacy and sex. Now, when we think about this, sex and death, in French, orgasm is le petit mort, which means like the little death. And so it's this idea that when we're having an orgasm, when we're in the throes of passion, we become one with the other being, right? Literally, figuratively, our bodies are connected. We are one for that moment in time, that place in time. We are one, we are merged. And this is like the depth that Scorpio goes to. Scorpio is not going to have so much like, and they can, of course, this is a generalized statement, but Scorpio is not here just for like the fun and like casual one-offs, right? Scorpio is here to merge souls. Scorpio is deep and it's intense. And it's like, yeah, it's just like all that. Scorpions, like the actual, I was going to say insects. I don't even know what they are, but it's a scorpion. I don't know, but scorpions themselves, when they have their little mating ritual, it's actually like a little dance. So the male scorpion like kind of dances around the female. He gets his little pinchers and her pinchers or whatever. He like plants his little sack of sperm, and then he like dances her around until she lands on it, and then she gets impregnated, and then he runs away quickly because there's a chance she'll eat him afterwards, right? She gets violent. She wants to eat him afterwards. So it's just this weird thing. They have this little dance and they merge, right? Like they like connect their little claws or pinchers or whatever you want to call them. And then she absorbs him into her. And then he has to like quickly run away so he doesn't get eaten by her. But I just thought it was like kind of interesting, this like analogy, right, of this whole thing. So Scorpio is depth. Like, where in your chart is this? And what planets are there? What sign, or sorry, what house is there? What planets are there? We're not all going to feel it as intensely as the other. I personally have what they call a Hades moon. So Pluto in Scorpio is square to my Leo moon, which actually makes it operate more like a Scorpio moon. But then I know people who have Scorpio moons who actually aren't that scorpionic, right? And so it really depends on like so much of your chart, how intensely you're going to feel it. Again, for me with the Hades moon, like I feel everything. It's so intense. And I've gone through these like death and rebirth cycles. And when you say like Pluto and Scorpio, they have to go through these lower frequencies. When I tell you, for most of my life emotionally, I could not get out of the frequency and the emotions of jealousy, of possession, of anger, of like those things. It really took a lot of awareness, a lot of practice. And I'm sure I can even be triggered back into that now. Like, I'm not saying I've transcended above that. I feel like I've done a lot of work to transcend to a higher level. And also, I recognize that you could probably still put me there because I have a Hades moon and it's just always going to be a part of it. But it goes through these cycles, these death and rebirth cycles. And I learn something new every single time. And you're just kind of like, I mean, it's not, it's not a linear path, right? Like healing is cyclical. So it's like this spiral that keeps going. And it's like, sometimes I'm higher and sometimes I'm lower, but then I'm always getting higher, right? I love that analogy. You can't see on the podcast, but if you're watching on YouTube, it's like, if you think about the oh my gosh, what the cylinder, there's a term I'm looking for, the you know what I'm talking about, but the circle, right? If I start here and then I go down and I'm in this low of emotion, but then I come up and I'm going a little bit higher, but then I'm always going to come down, but I'm higher than I was before. And then I'm going to go up, but then I'm going to come. It's just like this constant thing, but eventually you're going to get up. You're always going to dip lower, right? And so to think that we're not healing is inaccurate, but it's like, what are you doing? And how are you regulating yourself? So all of that. And the last piece that I want to talk about is Uranus is exalted in Scorpio, which is really interesting. And it makes so much sense because, yeah, Scorpio is so much death. But when you think about Uranus, the awakener, like Scorpio, obviously, a shadow side of Scorpio is manipulation, right? Obviously, within manipulation, there are lies, deceit, like all those things. But then Uranus being exalted in Scorpio makes sense because Uranus is bringing the truth, which is really what Scorpio values. In order to transcend all the lower frequency stuff, we have to come to the truth. We have to awaken to ourselves. We have to take radical responsibility. And in that will free us to then alchemize and come to this like higher state of Scorpio. So, all of that to say, enjoy Scorpio season, wherever it is in your chart. Again, I know it's intense, but really like leaning into it and doing the work. Again, identifying, recognizing where in your chart it is. If you can see any patterns that come up around this time of year, I know for me what it is, it's usually something like, yeah, it's intense. Any like major breakup in my life has always been during Scorpio season. And then it's like Sagittarius is kind of like building new and all those things. But yeah, but Scorpio has been traditionally an intense sign for me, an intense season for me. And I've also noticed that having awareness of that, and working with Scorpio season can be really helpful. So with Scorpio season, doing the subconscious work, I mean, which I think is really great all the time, but specifically, Scorpio gives us the ability to really dive into the underworld and really witness those patterns and really create awareness. So as you're navigating, or, wherever this is in your chart, whatever area of life, however you're experiencing it, however you're feeling it, just like allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling, take responsibility, recognize, and just like elevate yourself just a little bit, right? Like, how can you do something better? How can you regulate yourself? How can you like come into and allow the depth of it, because it is really, really, Scorpio is such beautiful energy, like really, right underneath it all. But it is that alchemization. So creating rituals, routines around this. Yeah, I don't know. Join us inside the Inner Mother Collective. I might start a series. I want to start something in supporting seasonally. I do a lot of tapping, so there will always be tapping exercises. The Roof and Rebel, you can find, this is a secret podcast. You can head over there. Astro Design School, all the links that you need to know are down in the show notes. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know. Reach out to me on Instagram, TikTok, wherever you found me. Would love to hear if this was supportive, if it was helpful, if you have anything that you want to share, anything like that. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you next time.